Don't want to be seen in this. I'm going to leave from here. I'm going to avoid this text message. I'm not going to reply to these people. I'm just going to scroll on my phone instead. As you've all seen, Jordan Peterson talks about Carl Jung and refers to him quite regularly. And Carl Jung is essentially the person who invented psychology. He literally invented psychology and personality types. Super smart. And if you look through a lot of modern literature that people write in psychology, at the foundation of everything, Carl Jung has been the creator. He created like the 16 personalities and the personality types and all those things, if you've seen any of that around here. So in this video in particular, I have read some of Carl Jung's books out of recommendation from Jordan Peterson. I've read this book, Humanity Symbols, and I'm going to get into a part 1 of this book in this podcast episode. So if you get anything out of this and you're super pumped, please subscribe or follow us for that one. Yes, so this is intense and this is going to be a very in-depth podcast. So if you're like, oh, I want something chill and I want to like listen and relax to something, this isn't going to be the one. This is for you if you're hardcore into personal growth, shadow work, and want to understand the inner workings of your mind, and you crave and you yearn for depth and meaning and making courageous decisions with your life. This podcast is I'm going to be running through my notes of this book, and I can't wait to reread this again. Like I have a lot of stuff under here that's, you see the bottom of this page that's been like highlighted underneath for quotes and things that I think is really powerful. And what I did when I read this book was I went through and I wrote notes out for the entire thing. Like I just writing hella notes. And essentially, I've taken these notes. I'm going to run over my notes and explain them to you so you understand what they're like. So I'm going to try to keep this to around 30, 40 minutes because honestly, it gets pretty in depth to the point where you're like, whoa. And as I'm talking, like in real time, I'm going to be like figuring things out and redefining things in my brain because I've had like a read over this, and when I read over things, it like triggers things in my brain that I've learned because I've also read a bunch of other books. Some other ones I'm going to be getting into soon is Robert Bly's Iron John, Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. And at the moment I've been fascinated with this book called Facing Shame. And it's all helping me with my personal growth community, Set the Standard, which is a men's personal development community for entrepreneurs and business people who are looking to get to the next level. Our vision is amazing, and we're just, we're really helping people level up. We've got the education, we've got community, we've got live group coaching calls, and if you're interested, you can book in a call with me down below. But before that, let's get stuck into this book, Humanity Symbols, and the notes, and like my takeaways, which I think are pretty powerful. Like everyone's going to have different takeaways from the book. I've only known, I think there's 2 other people who joined my community who actually read the book, and my content manager, he's read the first chapter and it's taken him like a few months. He's like, I got through the first chapter and my mind is blown. He said to me, he's like, I was talking to one of my friends and they felt like a stranger to me after reading this, and he's like, and it was great. I was like, well, how fantastic is that? So I'm going to go through my notes and let's just dive deep. Hey, let's just get straight in there. So one thing that he talks a lot about in the book is actually taking symbols seriously. Like A Man and His Symbols, essentially what is meant by the title is symbols is referring to symbolism. So if you have a dream and something represents a bear, for you, the role of you having a dream, understanding that there's a bear there, is to ask yourself, what does that symbolize to you? What does a bear symbolize to you? And the next time, let's say if you have the dream and you're conscious enough in your dream to turn around and look at it, it could be like your dad, or it could be a younger version of yourself or something like that, right? So that's what he means by a man and his symbols. And symbols have been used throughout the longest time through history, religions, everything to really represent something. Like the circle is a symbol, and the circle, I think, is a symbol of spiritual wholeness. A square is a symbol of the body, and then a square and a circle together is the body within the soul. And if you look at a lot of Aztec stuff, they've got a lot of images of like circles within squares, right? Which is so interesting, like so interesting. So symbols mean a lot because that's how our brain recognizes things, like not just through words, but through symbols. And the letter essentially is almost a symbol, or words almost a symbol. And then there's images that we have used throughout the longest period of time. So we get into those and we figure out like, okay, what are these actual symbols? And that's just really important to be aware of, to understand like, hey, we got to take our dreams seriously. And the reason that we want to take our dreams seriously is because of the symbolism from our subconscious that it's sending into our brain. Because we don't just think in words. Like when you think about things, like imagine if you just wrote everything out in your brain, right? Sentences and paragraphs whenever you thought about something. It's not going to happen. When you think about something, what is going to happen is you're going to picture an image or a scene or like a video in your brain and you go, whoa, like remember that moment, or I see this thing, or look at this idea. And the idea is sometimes just a feeling, and the feelings get expressed through symbols, which is really awesome. So I've written down my notes here, like dreams are expressions of your unconscious, right? So yeah, and like it gets pretty hardcore into the stuff here. And I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna mention this stuff because it might put people off the book, but you know what? Screw it. Like we're here to go deep. So essentially, there is an archetype called the Great Mother, and it's like one of the first archetypes. And essentially, if you don't know what an archetype is, like put your thinking cap on, guys. We're going in deep here. This is an in-depth podcast. An archetype is almost like a certain personality trait that you have, to explain it in simple ways. However, it's usually linked to a part of your shadow or a part of your personal growth. And most of the time, an archetype you can make unconscious decisions out of your archetype. Like you ever react back to a partner, right? You get reactive or angry or grumpy or frustrated or avoidant, and you're like, oh, nah, and you just get like really reactive. That is usually an archetype playing. Sometimes if you're in a leadership position, you're standing in front of people, boom, here's another archetype. When I walk home into my house, here's another archetype I've got to play. But if you're the archetype of the boss and the leader, which is usually like the king or the ruler or something, and then you go home and you have that archetype and you go home to your partner, like your partner's going to be like, get away from me, and like unconscious projections are going to be going everywhere. So the Great Mother is the one that tries to like hug everyone and keep them close. And you see this as like the great manipulator, and that it's sort of the one who's like, I really need to be needed. So subtly and unconsciously, I'll try to weave things with you and do things extra for you so that you feel obliged to hang out with me and you want to stay with me all the time. That is the archetype of the Great Mother. It's the one who does not want, it's the story of the mother who doesn't want to lose her son, right? I want to keep him, or my daughter, whatever it is. So example is that your dream could be you having sex with your mum. Right, and we have crazy dreams, right? So don't tell me that you haven't had any weird ass dreams about like having sex with someone that you shouldn't, because it happens in dreams all the time. But what that may mean in terms of the Great Mother archetype is like you're taken by the Great Mother archetype and you're actually being a simp and you're being really needy, right? So that is what could be showing up in the actual dream. It's like, wow, so it's got nothing to do with the person. Whatever your sexual dreams or happen in the dreams is like, okay, what does mum symbolize to you? Like, what does it mean to you? Not anything else. So sometimes you have like dreams, like I know a lot of people have this about them cheating on their partner or the partner cheating on them, right? It's like, okay, well, what does your partner actually symbolize to you? And then what does cheating symbolize to you as well? And it could be that like maybe and it has to relate to you and you got to feel it. Like you got to feel it and like really dissect it, which is handy having someone there because doing it by yourself is crazy. But let's say, for example, your ex represents to you like an old version of yourself, like an old love of how you were like, you know, a few years ago. And then you have a dream about cheating and it's like, maybe you're betraying that person of yourself, right? There's a part of yourself that you're betraying with the decisions that you're making now. Maybe you started drinking and you quit drinking like 4 years ago. Next minute you're having all these dreams about your pain. Like, what the hell? But what I found in my own experience analyzing these things is most of the time it has something to do with your partner or an ex partner, and it's just showing up now and you're like, what is going on? Which is crazy. So it's interesting to pay attention to those things because that is like hypothetically understanding what a symbol is. And I need you guys to understand that. So, which is really cool. So yeah, it's interesting. Like they've just like some notes here is like hero symbols arise when the ego needs strengthening. So if you're starting seeing symbols of swords or whatever it is, it's like, you know, my ego needs strengthening here, not letting go. Like a lot of people think, and I know this happens regularly. People are like, oh, you know, like Ryan Holiday's ego is the enemy. I haven't read the book. Like I have not read the book, so I'm not commenting on that. But I don't know if he's being cheeky with the title there because I haven't read it. However, with the actual statement of ego is the enemy, depending on the context, in the context that we're talking about, like depending on the context, 100% right, but depending on our context, I would say it was wrong because it's really good to have a healthy ego when needed and then be able to disable it. So we want to be able to use our ego full on and then bring it back. And there's different parts of the ego too, depending on like some great philosophers like Sigmund Freud and stuff said. It's got like the id, the elephant, whatever it is, the id, the superego, and the ego. So essentially, mission can be like, don't need to worry about that one. So essentially what was really cool, I really like in this one is initiation rites break the cycle. So some men need to be aroused and others seduced. So depending on where a man or a human in general, they say man here, meaning man and woman in the text. Depending on where they're at with their life, And an initiation is the thing that breaks the cycle. And it's all linked to the hero's journey, which is why before reading this, I read like A Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. And I read that out, and that sort of maps out the hero's journey step by step by step by step by step. I'll have a link somewhere here to that. You can listen to it. And I'm also going to create some more content around the hero's journey because I believe it's the most powerful thing that we can use for our own growth. People use it for movies. We can use it for our own growth. Holy hell. Like, watch out, Tony Robbins, coming for you. So, coming for you, make some eye contact with the camera right there. So, with this initiation, right? So, an initiation is what we do like in our retreats, for an example. So, set the standard retreat. One of ours is called The Next Level. We got a 3-day weekend, 3-day workshop. Retreat, and we have a 1-day, which is the next level. So next level retreat and the next level. And essentially what happens in those is it's like a full-on rite of passage for men to come down. There's tests, there's like games, there's all these different things, a lot of reflection and a lot of coaching, writing things down and figuring stuff out to basically break someone down and bring them back up. Sort of like a Navy SEAL camp, but for psychology and personal development. Like, it's insane. You don't actually have to do the Navy SEAL stuff to like break someone down. We use a lot of behavioral stuff. It's actually nuts. It's the best thing that we've ever created. Like, we had the comments that we've had are just nuts. So have been amazing. I shouldn't say nuts. I got some nuts in between my legs, but we're not. I'm referring to something positive here. So some men need to be aroused. Oh, I'm feeling aroused right now. Let's go. And others need to be seduced. And what happens is being aroused is actually getting excited. You know what I mean? Whoa, I need to go break this cycle, do this thing, like part of this initiation, right? Which they do in armies. You know what I mean? There'll be certain tests and things that people can do for an initiation. In the modern world, there isn't that many initiations right now. It's like you graduate from school. If you don't graduate from school, you miss out on the ceremony. You graduate from uni, there's a ceremony there. In between that period, especially in Australia and other countries, it's just drinking and taking drugs. Like, that is literally the initiation ceremony that we have, and who can party the longest, which I believe without the modulation of really powerful, strong, centered, mature adults, it's just completely toxic, right? Like, and there's nothing really facilitated for us to move forward. I do think there's another initiation which is coming across, which is people doing business courses and doing personal development and understanding content and making a life and a business out of e-commerce, content, all the rest of it. And it's like, this initiation is pay heaps of money for a course because the courses are expensive, and learn all the skills and the strategies and go kick some ass. And if you're not that person, then you're just going to be living in the matrix. So essentially, like, some people need to be aroused, like, yeah, come on, hype up, let's go. Other people need to be seduced. And that's seduced into the initiation, right? And then seduced to the next cycle. And same thing with the aroused. With the seduced, is sort of like instead of like, come on, let's go, we need to do this. It's more of like an attraction, like showing people and seeing like how good it looks. And they go, wow, like I really need to be a part of that thing. And then it's like, well, you're invited. And they think, holy shit, like I'm invited to this thing. Yeah, and it's special and it's exclusive. Bring some of that in there. Works really well for sales, which is cool. And the reason for the initiation rites and consistently breaking the cycles, depending on what hero's journey you're in, is to go on your own personal pilgrimage. It's like our whole life. Everyone says, you know, the quote, it's not the end goal, it's the journey, right? But what does that even mean? Because we hear it all the time. And sometimes it confuses me because I'm like, I hear it so many times, I take the meaning out of it. So the meaning is personal pilgrimage. It's to live is to live a really high quality hero's journey, one after the another, and consistently making sure that we're pilgrimaging for ourselves, which a lot of it's facing off with our own shadow. So we think that, you know, our life is building a business, is leaving a legacy, is, you know, creating the family and doing the things. But realistically, looking at this, it's how far you can go down into your own shadow, get back out and win. Which is why some people find it very difficult to do personal growth and learn the psyche and learn all this stuff, because it's quite confronting to look at like versions of yourself and parts of yourself that are clouded in shame and are fogged by guilt, and having to face those things and then be like, okay, how do I overcome these? Like consistently, every single day, there's no end to it. And I believe that like running through that of like, okay, life's really good. Here's the shadow, identify the shadow. Oh, a little bit of a breakdown, go through a repair phase. And then let's start again. Is extremely healthy way to become aware of our shadows and integrate our own identities to ourselves. Pausing here so that you guys can just lock this in your brain. Let's take a breath. Hectic, right? A lot of information there. So one of the things that we can do for that is, and I really like this, with, you know, maybe it's the shadow. Some people talk about an integration with the shadow in here. They also talk about a disintegration with the shadow, right? And essentially the less attention you pay to it and put in, the darkness gets bigger and it grows. So we don't want to disintegrate with our shadow. We want to integrate with our shadow every single day. So instead of maybe it's the shadow, it is most likely going to be the shadow, which is the importance of shadow work. And a lot of shadow work is just literally, it's just looking at the uncomfortable parts of yourself. Like, to summarize it real shortly, it's the things that's like, oh, that's not me. That's not me. Oh, that is you. Most of the time it's regarded in shame. And the definition for shame, where the shadow, the manipulation, all that stuff comes from, is shame is what's wrong with me. Guilt is I did something wrong. When the shame is a lot more powerful, because if it's something wrong with me, what do you try to do? Ladies and gentlemen, drum roll please. Bang, you try to hide that shit. Oof, so toxic. Don't want to be seen in this. I'm going to leave from here. I'm going to avoid this text message. I'm not going to reply to these people. I'm just going to scroll on my phone instead. I hope that never happens again. Like, I'm not going to be seen like this. I'm going to wear an oversized t-shirt to the gym so no one can look at my muscles. That was me, by the way. I had really big muscles and wanted to hide them. Not anymore. So bring it on. So essentially, yeah, it's really interesting that happens. And we don't want a big, huge, scary shadow. We want to be, it's like Peter Pan, right? You know how Peter Pan he grabbed a bar of soap and he's trying to like glue his shadow on. But it's interesting that, I forgot her name, Mary or something. She stitches the shadow back onto Peter Pan's foot. That represents the feminine restitching the shadow back onto Peter Pan, which is when Peter Pan finds his anima, which is they talk about that in this here. There's two parts to a man's psyche. You've got the shadow, and then beneath the shadow is the anima and the animus. For a man, the anima is the woman side of him, like the feminine side of him that is within the masculine, and the animus is the masculine side of the woman, which is inside of her. And a whole part of our journey is to integrate that. Some people's less so, some is more so. So it was kind of said like around the 70s, a lot of men who were integrating with their feminine side a lot better by having the 70s where people were like partying, festivals, weed, long hair, colorful shirts, all of those things. But essentially the feminine is really like opening your heart and being able to really integrate with love, which actually makes a man a really strong, powerful leader. And then as a woman, being able to integrate the animus, which is, you know, it's the structure, it's the drive, it's the purpose that she has for her, and understanding that. And most of the time, you know, that can come around to family. So balancing those things inside yourself, extremely powerful. So essentially, I love this quote. We are all pure love under our shadow masks. Just take that in for a second. If you're listening to this, I've been speaking really fast. We are all pure love under our shadow masks, which is the importance to take them off every day, consistently facing that. I literally was on the phone to my content manager today because I had shadow shit coming up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't make these decisions in my life right now. Some hectic stuff going on. You have to follow me on social media, Corey Boutwell, if you want to follow along. But oh my goodness, there's some exciting things happening, and it is scary. But so essentially we want to keep doing that because there's so much love underneath here. And because of shame, we protect ourselves because we don't want to be seen. And with that, with our like shadow masks, like we always see a reflection of what we lack. So every time we get triggered, and then like, yeah, that happens all the time. Integrity is taking the conscious. Yes. This is really powerful. I like this quote. So integrity is taking the unconscious seriously, and it's got to get harder before it gets easier. So that is a commitment to integrity. When someone's asked what is integrity, it's taking the unconscious seriously, and it's got to get harder before it gets easier. What is meant by the unconscious is shadow, shame, guilt, reactivity. Sometimes it could be pressure, stress, like all of these different things where you're taking reactions that you're not 100% in control of. Like sometimes you're in a conversation with someone and you might speak to them and like you're having a chat and you just say some stuff and you're like, man, that wasn't me. Or why did I like unconsciously lie then right now? That's your unconscious making decisions. Or whenever you have a business deal or something else is happening and you're like, oh, I get scared. I don't want to do this business thing. Or like, what do I even do now? I feel like I lost my purpose again. Or like, oh man, I wish my wife just wasn't so angry at me all the time. It's like, well, that is time for you to take your unconscious seriously because your unconscious is currently in control, right? And if you want to get back into control, we have to let go of the control that our unconscious is trying to have and put ourselves into control of, you know, what is more conscious and is true to us. And eventually over a period of time, if us keep looking, we end up making these patterns conscious, make the unconscious conscious, and then the conscious unconscious, which is unconscious competence. I don't know if you guys have seen that square of like being like, okay, like the unconscious competence, conscious competence, and make it unconscious. So eventually like you create patterns of getting so aware of this stuff that then it starts to happen automatically. And you're like, oh, thank God. And you've got healthy patterns in your life and it's unconscious. And you're like, this is how I want it to be because it's been reprogrammed in my brain. That's what we do at Set the Standard. So we see that happening all the time on live coaching calls and the program stuff, which are elite. So yes, you can head to that one. Links are down below if you want to join. just booking a call with me. Let's go. Yes, and obviously it gets harder before it gets easier. So that's just the thing. And most of the times the hard, if we're going to explain what the hard is for this work, that is facing off with your own stuff. And it's pretty crazy the power of what you see. Like we see this in our retreats all the time, or someone having this shame or this guilt on their soul, on their chest, right? And it's just real powerful. Just speaking it out loud and expressing it from your body to someone, all gone. Pressure, stress, gone. We had one guy come back to our retreat because he had this thing about, it was like, it was just something he regretted with his partner that he did. And he's like, I come back to this retreat just to get that off my fucking chest. And I'm so happy I did. And it was like, nice. And like, it wouldn't be able to get it out or text someone or tell someone. He's like, I need to go and claim this shit in front of a group of studs who I respect and have them forgive me for it so that I can move the hell on. And now he's building huge businesses and doing all this like wild things in his life that he loves to do and open up into way more love with his partner, which is beautiful. So, also mentioned here, there's 3 kinds of people in humanity symbols. Sciencey people, spiritual people, and then both. So people that are in both, right? So science people are the explainers. They're the ones who explain everything, right? Spiritual people are everything happens for a reason, which I think sort of works really well with Glenn, my head coach in my community and myself, because I'm more sciencey. I'd say he's more spiritual, and then we have a really good blend of both. But both happens that there's conflicts between both of them. And this can also happen within inside your psyche. So, and some people are actually both. I'd probably say that, like for myself, over developing that, I'd definitely be more of a both. That took hard work to get to. I think I was actually more spiritual than sciencey. I went very sciencey, reading all this stuff, but it's about spiritual things. And then I got more spiritual and esoteric, and it's been quite fantastic. But also, yeah, the conflicts between the two are great because you have conflicts between both. And that is when you understand high quality communication, you understand your shadow and the unconscious, you can work through it. Fantastic. So I'm just going to get a little bit into consciousness now and actually talk about what consciousness is, right? So it's just a crazy concept, and this just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I'll talk about the shadow, and then we'll leave it at there until part 2. So essentially, I say essentially a lot. Let's go. That was unconscious. Look at my unconscious becoming conscious because I like that word. Man has developed consciousness slowly and laboriously in a process that took untold ages to reach a civilized state, which is arbitrarily dated from the invention script of about 4000 BC. And this evolution is far from complete, for large areas of the human mind are still shrouded in darkness. Whoa. Okay, so it just means that like our whole consciousness has developed really slowly. So it takes time. So the individual psyche is far from being synthesized. It is only a fragment too easily under the onslaught of unchecked emotions. So essentially what that means is like by checking and understanding and taking a reverence towards your emotions is like, that's what helps you, one way of synthesizing your psyche to become more conscious. Really powerful. There's a quote somewhere, it's like, emotions are divine influxes trying to tell you something, and they're not always bad. Fear is just an emotion. It's not real. So even though it's real in your body, right, it's not actually real because it's like, an emotion. Well, people could argue for that of being it's real. It's not real, but it's only happening inside your mind. So, and onside your body, and people can see it and smell it, and that's about it. So to the individual, I like this definition here is we can too become disassociated and lose our identity. We become possessed and altered by moods, or become unreasonable and unable to recall important facts about ourselves and others, so that people may say, what the hell has gotten into you? So whenever that happens is understanding like, okay, I like this terminology. You might hear Jordan Peterson talk about it quite often, but he says like this person was possessed, and he says it and he's like, oh, and his Canadian accent. And the possession is quite true, right? If you think about, for example, sometimes you just walk to the fridge and you're like, what the hell, open it. Or these days it's like, hey, just checking my phone, and you're like, yep. Get off my damn phone. Like you just know yourself scrolling. Next minute you're on TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram or something, and you're like, how the hell did I get on here? What is going on? Sometimes you're like, someone's talking to you, and then you're writing or you're typing, and you just typed out what they said. You're like, what is going on here? It's interesting because that is like a sign of possession, okay? And understanding that we can be possessed for months and years and weeks, which is actually quite scary to know that we're not completely in control, especially when someone says, what has gotten into you? Like, is this actually me or is it not? Now, there's two parts to this to understand, and this is some Corey stuff here, not the book stuff. One is that the role of the hero, this comes from heroology and hero myth that I've studied, is when you do find out parts of yourself, when you do start getting in control and you do start to understand your emotions and you're like, oh my goodness, there's this idea and this level and this version of myself that I want to bring into the real world. Bring it. But know that when you do bring it, some people will project against you their shadows, what has gotten into you. And your role and your duty is to maintain that and hold it. And they may say, hey, what has gotten into you? And you go, I'm on my purpose right now. That's what's gotten into me. Instead of being like, oh, is there something wrong with me? Is this? Because sometimes shame goes off. Or, should I actually be doing this thing? Am I questioning this decision? No questioning of the decision. When you're on your hero path, you are on it, right? You are on that thing and you're going for it. So go for it. And you got to hold everyone else's projections, which is essentially when they project on you, what's gotten into you? What the hell are you doing? It's just a mirror reflection. Back at that, you want to deflect those things and be like, yeah, well, I'm on my purpose. What's wrong with you? Why does that trigger you? You know what I mean? You say that and immediately, whoom, that's back onto them. You're not focusing on, oh, there's something wrong with me, which is really important. That's one, which is the positive way. And then you've got the negative way, which is like when you are possessed by something negative, because you could be possessed by something positive, run with that. If you're possessed by something positive, why wouldn't you want to keep that? But if you're possessed by something negative and it's not serving you, and you're acting like an idiot or like you're being the funny person, I'm gonna crack some jokes. People are like, what have got into you? Why are you cracking jokes? And you told me that you don't go to bed after 12 p.m. So why are like 12 midnight? So why are you out with your mates until 3 o'clock in the morning? That's really unintegral. Coming back to the integrity piece, right? And it's like, that's the thing. When we're talking about the integrity of like being, knowing that it's like taking your unconscious seriously, is like, oh, there you were unconscious and you were out of integrity. Wow. Can you guys see the power of this? Are you guys starting to hear it? Can you see it, like feel it? It's like, oh, this is real powerful, getting clear of this stuff. It's a little bit icky because it's like, holy, this is like deep, right? So we talk about being able to control ourselves, but self-control is a rare and remarkable virtue, right? Because we're not exactly, it's sort of like in here, the book is sort of, I would say on this quote, it's more of like an influence. We try to influence ourselves rather than control. But I do believe that we can have quite like really good self-control and get like a pretty damn basis of control. But we also want to not control everything because that takes the beauty out of everything as well. So we want to be in and out of control and really influence, sort of like, let's say, conductor of a band. You know what I mean? Who's conducting like an orchestra. We may think we have ourselves under control, yet a friend can easily tell us things about ourselves which we have no knowledge, which is interesting. We do this exercise at State of Community where when you get to a certain level, you got to send 5 people a text message and it's like ask them a question for direct feedback, positive and negative. And the negative feedback, we always say, well, that's true because that's how they perceive you. They could have you something and it's not 100% true right in yourself, but it's not embodied if they don't see it. Very interesting. So, and it's like, they'll tell you these things about yourself and you're like, wow, I knew all of these things, but these things I actually had no idea. Thank you for telling me, which is a great example in here. To say like, oh, do we have full control? And then it's like, oh, maybe we don't. An ability to control one's emotions may be very desirable from one point of view, would be questionable accomplishment from another, for it would deprive social intercourse of variety, color, and warmth. Very interesting. Social intercourse. So this is, I would say, like having awareness of when to be in control and when not control. If you're a control freak, that's the thing that I was mentioning before, and it is healthy to be able to surrender and let go regularly and not be in control. Because if you're in control of everything all the time, that's honestly, most likely from some other books that I've read, is you running away from shame. I'm going to try to control everything because if I'm out of control, I'm going to get hurt, I'm going to be embarrassed, people are going to see me for a fraud or a fake or whatever it is. Fuck that shit. We want to lean into that. So, okay, let's get into the initiation process and the shadow. This is really cool. Right, so what is the initiation process, baby, that we've mentioned and talked about in here? That is a rite of submission, a period of containment, and a further rite of liberation. So this is really cool. Like, I feel like a really high quality initiation would be the Navy SEALs doing Navy SEALs training like David Goggins did when he was going crazy. That is a rite of passage. I feel like one of the reasons, if I was to explain why David Goggins is so powerful and so out there and doesn't give a hell what anyone thinks and is accomplishing all these great things, is because he's intentionally putting himself under initiations consistently. hardcore ones, something out of his comfort zone. Boom, next initiation. And I went to Dr. Andrew Huberman on the weekend and to listen to him talk, and he was mentioning there's a part of your brain which literally you strengthen it, it increases willpower, and that's done by doing things you don't want to do. And I was like, well, you can see that part of David's brain would be solid as hell. So rite of submission would be something like that, but they can also be done ceremony, and any sort of ceremony is a rite of passage. Marriage, beautiful, a beautiful way of an initiation into the next phase of each other's weddings. Like my partner's like, I don't really mind too much of having a wedding or not. Like I'm really not phased. I don't want a few people there because I'm just throwing under the bus here, probably some family shame that she's got going on. But I'm like, I want like the best wedding ever, specifically because of that initiation ceremony, to declare our love, to have that next phase into the next journey, because it is so beautiful and powerful. The ego accuses responsibility of obstruction, whence deadly boredom. Ego accuses responsibility of obstruction, whence deadly boredom. I feel like I need some time to dissect that and get back to that, because right now, hell no. Oh, maybe we could try for it. Ego accuses responsibility of obstruction. So essentially saying there's heaps of different stuff, it gets in the way, and it's everyone else's things that's getting in the way's fault and their problem as to like when you're bored, which is actually boredom is a symptom of anger. So it's like, okay, if I'm angry and I'm bored, that's when I start accusing everything that's getting in my way. It's that thing's fault, which is playing the victim, pointing the blame game. When you're sick or bored of life and it's ready for a new change, that is when you have reached the start of the individuation process. The individuation process is sort of like a sequence of initiations in order to get to yourself, the best version of yourself. We say higher self and stuff, but it's really the best version of yourself is explained in a lot of different ways. It's not becoming something. It's actually removing away all of the layers to completely express of who you are, because who you are is amazing and beautiful and unique and powerful. And the only thing that gets in the way of that is all of the masks and stuff that we put on ourselves. So getting to the best version of yourself is actually more of just a process of authenticity, which is called individuation process. Like the word individuation, becoming an individual is essentially what it means. So the process begins when one has painful realizations about oneself, and one's own conscious attitudes, and swallows all sorts of bitter truths, which can show up as necessary villain from the dark side. So painful realizations about oneself. So painful realizations about oneself is like, wow, I'm not who I thought I was. I am a bit of a fraud. I am really lazy. I'm not doing this thing here. I'm not as good enough partner. I'm not taking responsibility. I really want to be here and I'm not right now. I'm actually 40. I've got kids and I'm not connecting them with the way that I would like to be. And I used to have this prostitute addiction and I'm fucking shameful about that and I never want to talk about it. Blah, 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 blah. Right. All these things that could be coming up is like, okay, when you're having those realizations about yourself and need to change, holy moly, a lot of people have breakdowns, right? Anxiety, panic attacks, all these different breakdowns. And I encourage them for this exact reason, right? It's like having those painful realizations. Holy shit, I'm not where I want to be. I'm running out of my time. My girlfriend's going to leave me. All of these things. Holy shit. Like all of those things is like a congratulations. Like welcome to the phase of your individuation, the first phase, because it's not comfortable and it's very natural, I think, for human beings to have those sort of emotions and have those sort of breakdowns. But it's when people aren't looked after, it's when the tribe isn't there to help them, it's when they haven't got community or friends around them where it can actually be quite damaging, or they're not seeing a therapist to talk out all of these different things, or they're not a part of Set the Standard, right, to hold them accountable to crush it and talk about and get through these things. So if they're not like in that, it can be very dangerous. But if there is, when it used to be in society, people going through those things back in tribal days, everyone would talk about stuff. So one's own conscious attitudes, really powerful. There's a lot that talks about this of like, you know, the biggest influence that anyone can have for the best growth possible, so they can get the riches that they want, they can seek the career that they want, have the fulfillment that they want, the relationship that they want, make the impact they want, create how they want, all comes down to influencing your own attitude. Whoa. Because think about it, when your attitude is bulletproof and it's amazing and you just have this great outlook on everything, and you're unwaverable, even if it gets down, things go down, you're going to win. So influencing your own attitude, so powerful. And it's sort of like perceptions and attitudes, I believe, after doing a lot of this work, is the key to success. So if anyone wants like the biggest business returns or anything like that, or crushing it and like making a huge impact or having a really good relationship or getting healthy and jacked as hell, most of it comes down to literally just changing your perception and your attitude. And it's like, you know, some people get the wind of it and they carry that. And if you don't have the attitude and you haven't got the mental fortitude or the perception, and then it gets scary, you bail, you feel shame, you feel guilty about things, you don't make decisions, you show up as a fraud, like you may do all the things you tell your employees not to do, that's out of integrity, because unconsciously you know you shouldn't be doing that. When you're out of integrity, catch you later. That's going to ruin your attitude. You go into a business meeting with a real big dog who believes in you, wants to invest in you, and you're like, I'm not worthy. Why am I not worthy? Because I'm living out of integrity with my employees. What? All right, I hope this is blowing you guys' brains out of the park right now. And I hope you're taking it in. We're almost there, guys. We're almost there. So swallows all sorts of bitter truths. This is the hard part, right? When you are having those panic attacks and realizing, holy hell, these things in my life aren't working how I'd like to work right now. Oh my goodness, I'm realizing these things. Swallow that shit. I love this quote. I can't remember who it was from. It was one of the higher ups in America, in the American government, but it was, I ate my words every single day, and I found the diet quite nourishing. It's talking about eating the shadow, right? It's talking about eating the shadow, which comes from the dark side. And speaking of the shadow, let's get into it here, all right? So essentially, the shadow, we've got a couple of different parts in that. Anima and animus, I talked beforehand, okay? The purpose of the anima is in a man's mind, and it's the feminine symbol behind the shadow for difficult and subtle ethical problems. Wow. Which is really powerful for men, because men who get in positions of power and do develop their ego and start to move through in life, when they do start getting to problems, it is the subtlety. It is the line between purple and yellow. They're a very similar color, and like when you start looking at them, they're everywhere, but it's the subtlety in between, which is really powerful, which looks like vague feelings. Like if you know that you're not integrated, your anima isn't integrated, vague feelings, you're receptive to the irrational. So all this irrational thinking and stuff, you'll go into that. Capacity for personal love is low. Your moods up and down. You have, like, part of it is some positive stuff, and there's prophetic hunches. Oh, I've got this hunch or this intuition. Feeling for nature, the relationship to the unconsciousness, and positive capacity for personal love as well. So, which is really cool. Some other negative things and it's usually shaped by your mum as well, your relationship with your mum, the anima. But it's being irritable, depressed, touchy, uncertain, insecure. And then, like, you know, when you're receiving the anima and it's like coming in and it's a negative way, it's, you know, it's words like, I'm nothing makes sense. For other people, it's different. Like, I actually like nothing. I don't like anything anymore. All of those types of words and sentences that you're saying to yourself is literally just letting you know that the anima is there, which is interesting. These symptoms can lure a man into suicide. The anima has the potential for truth twisting, and it can be known as the death demon, especially for men. It lures men away from reality, like the poisoned damsel myth. And essentially what that is like there's some sort of myth, a poisoned damsel, where it's like, this girl's like, oh, I need help, come help me. And then it comes in, poisons the guy, kills him. It's talked about in Greek myth. I can't remember what hero gets killed from that. One of the beautiful men gets, like, turned into a stag by Athena or something. One of the goddesses, when he was out hunting them, and then his hunting pack go kill him and eat him and drag him away. It's like a perfect story of the anima, like, coming up and like eating your, like, psyche out, essentially. But yeah, it's extremely true, and it's like, it can be subtle and destructive, and it can have cheap truth twisting to it. To understand if those things are happening and you're having those thoughts, it's like, okay, there's some work here to do with the anima, which is dealing with those feminine aspects in your own mind that appears behind the own shadow. So it's like, you know, what it also does as well, understand, we're getting into it before we figure out a solution, because you guys will be like, holy hell, this sounds like the worst thing ever. But it's alive and it's real, and I want us to understand this, that it's playing all the time in our brains. And for women, it's the same thing. For you guys, just the animus works differently in terms of the masculine. I'll get into that into another episode, though. Unable to cope with the hardships of life. Yeah, so if he has a positive experience with his mum, this is usually what happens. Unable to cope with the hardships of life. The anima is kind to turn men into sentimentalists. Feelings of tenderness, sadness, sensitive, and nostalgia. Those people have a positive experience with his mum. The anima involves men in destructive intellectual games. Prevents man, through its internal dialogue, getting in touch with life. Like, really getting in the flow, really getting into the grooves if he has a real positive relationship with his mother. This is all positive relationship. Reflects about life so much he can't live it, and loses its spontaneous, the outgoing feeling. The most frequent forms of the anima take the form of erotic fantasy, which a lot of men is like watching porn, scrolling on TikTok girls. When a man does not sufficiently cultivate his feelings in relationships, when his feelings and attitudes towards life has remained infantile. When a man does not sufficiently cultivate his feelings in relationships, his feeling attitude towards life has remained immature. So essentially what it's saying is there is like to really bring out your feeling with life will really help cultivate your feelings in your relationships. A lot of them like two sides of the same coin. Your passion for relationship, your passion for life. Man, fall in love too quickly and he can project and weave fantasies around her. The anima presence causes this. This is positive relationship with the mum. Solution to affairs. If the anima is recognized so the solution is if your anima is recognized as inner power. Man to bring his own being to maturity by integrating unconscious personality and bringing it to real life. So this is bringing the unconscious conscious. So it's just becoming aware of these things behind you, doing shadow work. You don't necessarily have to be like, this is my anima speaking. I actually don't encourage that because it's such a massive wormhole to go down and to use. And unless you're planning on becoming a coach, I don't think there's like much point. If you want to become like my friend and learn all this stuff and you think that I'm really cool and you want to hang out with me and you can learn this and we can have chats about it, that'd be sick. So please do it for those reasons. But if not, then I'd say the best way to sort of look at it would be instead to be like, okay, so where just all these shadow things about myself. So where am I touchy? Where am I depressed? Where am I irritable? I want to increase my capacity for personal love. I have these hunches. Like what can I start looking at? And most of the time parts are going to be your relationship with your mum. Other parts are going to be looking at where you feel, shame and guilt and being able to express and move through those things in a powerful way. But yeah, the positive side of the anima is it's responsible for finding the right marriage partner, digging out discerning facts from the logical mind hidden in the unconscious, which is really cool. So if you're someone who has a powerful logical brain and you want to get things out, it's like you want to dig those facts out, the hidden in the unconscious. The anima is responsible for that. So when you have like powerful ideas that knows that you're online and you're doing the work, aligning man's mind with the right inner values, opening the way to more profound depths. So cool. So really getting clear on your own values and what you like and really leaning into them. So it's allowing you more depth and meaning and yearning in your life that feels more rich and fulfilling, sort of bland, stale and bleh, which we don't want, and allows the voice of the great man or Übermensch, Friedrich Nietzsche, to be heard. So essentially the positive anima is responsible for your higher self to be heard and to help you make decisions and to be able to look between the lines whether the idea is something toxic, unconscious and going to be negative and instead something that's going to be positive and help you like move forward. So that is essentially, there's a little bit more in here, guys. Y'all gonna have to hang on with me because I can feel you guys behind this thing being like, holy shit, I don't know how much more of this I can take, but we're gonna fill up your brain anyway, guys. 2 more points. So the shadow gives away to impulses that do not belong to him. An overwhelming rage to a friend when they identify a fault within you. Self-education is the labors one must do to overcome it. How powerful that. Projection on others are symptoms of the shadow. The shadow is not an opponent. It only becomes hostile when it is ignored or misunderstood. The shadow is the opposite of ego. It embodies qualities on dislikes in others. So the ego compares to the things that it likes to other people. Oh my God, I want that. Let's go. The shadow is the opposite. It embodies the qualities it dislikes on other people. The shadow has passionate desire that is unreasonable. The heroic decision is the superhuman effort only possible if your higher self helps individuals carry it through. The overwhelming shadow power, irresistible impulses should not always be heroically repressed. So some of those impulses, the irresistible ones, are like they shouldn't like be repressed. Sometimes they're trying to tell you something. The shadow contains vital voices that should make an actual experience and not repress it. It is up to the ego to give its pride to live out something that seems to be as dark, and it may not be, but it may require a sacrifice as heroic as the conquest of passion in the opposite. So sometimes that could be like moving, you know what I mean? Like, holy hell, to give up my pride or give up my business, sell my business, give this thing that I love and I just need to let go and go away. That can be like helpy sometimes. But what is mentioned here, and I'll leave it on this one, is that, well, actually 2 here. It takes a lot of courage to take the unconsciously seriously and tackle the problems it raises. And people are too lazy to consider how the unconscious affects them. So congratulations, guys, for getting through part 1 of this. That was a behemoth of a chat. And I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, comments below, send me a DM and Corey Boutwell on Instagram. And if you like this, you got any value out of this, please follow, share with someone. That would be amazing. And if you're interested in learning a little bit deeper on this and you're like, hey, you know what, I'm actually going to work with Corey, book in a call below. Big love, guys. See you in the next one.